When a billionaire dad sees a shy girl, too scared to dance, kind waitress's simple hug changes everything, and what happens next will warm your heart forever. The grand ballroom glittered under 1,000 crystal lights, each chandelier shimmering like frozen fireworks in the warm golden glow. Music floated through the air, the kind of music that made you want to tap your foot even if you didn't. Know the steps. The evening was meant to be perfect in every way. It was a charity gala, one of the most anticipated events of the year, and everything had been planned with precision. From the sparkling table arrangements to the way the band played only the softest jazz during dinner. The city's most influential people were here: business magnates, celebrities, politicians, artists, all dressed in their finest clothes, each trying to be seen, to make an impression, to play their part in the dance of status and generosity. At the center of it all was Richard Dawson, a man whose name carried both power and a certain kind of respect. He was known not only for his incredible wealth, but also for his philanthropy. He had built hospitals, funded scholarships, and donated millions to causes close to his heart. Tonight was one of his proudest events, an annual gala to raise funds for children's hospitals across the country. The idea was to combine elegance with purpose, to let people enjoy themselves while making a difference. He moved easily among the guests, shaking hands, sharing warm smiles, making small talk that sounded effortless, but was in fact carefully tuned to make everyone feel important. But while Richard was surrounded by attention, his mind wasn't entirely on the evening's program. Somewhere in the back of his awareness, he knew his daughter Emily was sitting quietly at their table. Emily was 8 years old, a delicate little girl with soft brown hair and large, thoughtful eyes. She had always been shy, not the kind of child to rush into games with strangers or speak up in a crowd. She preferred her sketchbooks, her stories, her quiet corners of the world where she could observe without being observed. Richard loved her deeply, but sometimes he wished she were more outgoing, more like the other children he saw at these events, who ran across the dance floor with unself-conscious joy. From where she sat, Emily could see the other children twirling under the chandeliers, their dresses fanning out like flower petals, their laughter bright and unrestrained. Every now and then, one of them would beckon her to join, but she would only shake her head politely, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The idea of stepping onto that floor with everyone watching made her stomach twist. She felt small, as though the ballroom itself were a giant stage, and she an unprepared actress who didn't know her lines. She wanted to dance. She really did. The music was lovely, and her feet itched to move. But the thought of leaving her chair, of walking past all those eyes and into that glittering circle, it was too much. She smoothed the skirt of her dress, a pale blue satin that shimmered. When it caught the light, her father had chosen it for her, saying she would look like a princess. And she did, in a way, but it didn't feel like armor against the nervousness curling inside her.
Oh no.
She kept her gaze on the floor, tracing the patterns of the marble tiles. With her eyes pretending not to notice the children spinning just a few feet away, Richard glanced over at her between conversations. He saw her sitting there, calm and still, and assumed she was simply taking her time. He knew she could be hesitant in new situations, but he believed that sooner or later she would gather the courage to join in. After all, she had done so before at smaller gatherings. He smiled to himself, imagining her suddenly standing up and twirling like the others. But tonight was different for Emily, though he didn't realize it. The music, the crowd, the glitter, it all felt overwhelming, like being caught in a storm of sound and movement at their table. The seats beside Emily were empty for the moment, the guests having drifted toward the buffet or the bar. This left her alone with her thoughts, which was both a comfort and a weight. She could watch without interruption, but it also made her feel even more apart from the laughter and spinning energy on the dance floor. She fiddled with the silver bracelet on her wrist, a gift from her grandmother, turning it round and round as though it might give her courage. But courage, it seemed, was not something she could summon tonight. Around her, conversations rose and fell like waves, snippets of laughter catching in the air, before dissolving into the hum of the crowd. The clink of glasses, the soft shuffle of waiters' shoes, the occasional burst of applause for the band, it all blended into a backdrop of festivity that somehow made her feel even more out of place. She wished her mother were there, but her mother had passed away when Emily was very young. Her father loved her fiercely, but he was often swept up in the demands of his public life, especially on nights like this. From the stage, the band began. A livelier tune, and the children squealed with delight, their movements becoming more energetic. A girl in a red dress spun so fast, her ribbon slipped from her hair and fluttered to the ground. Emily watched it fall, feeling an odd pang of longing. Not for the ribbon itself, but for the carefree way the girl moved, unbothered by the eyes on her. Emily's own feet remained firmly under the table, her knees pressed together, her back straight as though good posture might keep her invisible. Every so often, someone passing by would smile at her, perhaps even ask if she wanted to join the dancing. Emily would smile politely in return, the way she had been taught. But her answer was always the same. A small shake of the head, no words. She hoped they wouldn't press her, because she didn't know how to explain the knot in her stomach, the way her chest felt tight when she thought of stepping out there. Richard, meanwhile, was in the middle of a conversation with a fellow philanthropist about expanding their charity work to other cities. He was listening, nodding, offering ideas, but part of him kept drifting back to the small figure at his table. He had learned over the years that Emily needed her own time to warm up to situations, and he didn't want to push her. Still, he made a mental note to check on her soon. In the far corner of the room, near the entrance to the kitchen, waiters in crisp black uniforms moved efficiently between tables, their trays balanced with practiced ease. One of them, a young woman named Hannah, happened to glance toward Emily's table as she passed by with a tray of sparkling water. She noticed the little girl sitting alone, her posture neat but her expression guarded. Hannah was used to reading people. It was part of her job to anticipate needs, to sense when someone required attention before they even asked. She saw something in Emily's eyes that she recognized instantly, the quiet, heavy loneliness of feeling left out. Hannah had seen it before in her younger siblings. In shy children at school dances, even in herself when she was younger. She didn't know who the girl was, but something about the scene tugged at her heart. She kept walking, delivering the glasses to a nearby table, but her mind stayed on the little girl in the pale blue dress. Emily, oblivious to Hannah's glance, kept watching the dancers. She tried to tell herself it didn't matter if she danced or not, that she could enjoy the music from where she was. But deep down, she wished for something she couldn't quite name. Not just the courage to dance, but maybe a hand to hold. Someone to make her feel safe enough to take that first step. The night carried on, with music flowing and voices overlapping in the warm glow of the chandeliers. To the guests, it was a beautiful evening unfolding as expected. But for Emily, sitting quietly at her table, it was a night where every note of the music felt like both an invitation and a reminder of the distance between her, and the joy swirling just beyond her reach, unaware in the room, unnoticed by her father, unnoticed by most of the guests. A small, invisible thread was already beginning to form, one that would soon pull her into a moment she would never forget. Hannah moved carefully between the crowded tables, balancing her tray the way she had learned over years of working at events like this. The glasses on it clinked softly with each step, but she walked with the steadiness of someone who could weave through a storm without spilling a drop. She had been on her feet since early afternoon, helping the catering team set up for the gala, arranging napkins, polishing silverware, making sure every water glass caught the light just right. The ballroom was alive with the hum of conversation, the shimmer of sequined gowns, and the scent of roses drifting from the tall floral arrangements placed on every table. Hannah had worked dozens of events, but something about this one felt even grander, maybe. It was the chandeliers, or the way every guest seemed dressed as though they had stepped straight out of a magazine. She was halfway to a table of guests, who had just signaled for more drinks when she noticed her. A small girl in a pale blue dress sat alone, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The dress was beautiful, soft satin, with a delicate ribbon at the waist. But It didn't seem to make the girl feel part of the glittering celebration around her. Her eyes were lowered, her lips pressed together in a way that didn't look quite like a frown, but wasn't a smile either. Hannah had seen plenty of children at events like this, usually laughing, running around, and sometimes even causing trouble. This girl was different. She looked as though she wanted to be invisible, yet her stillness made her stand out even more. Hannah noticed the way the girl's eyes would lift for just a moment, watching the children dancing nearby, then drop quickly as though she'd been caught looking at something she shouldn't. Hannah's shift didn't leave much time for lingering, but the image of the girl stayed with her as she continued serving. She moved between tables, offering trays of small appetizers, puff pastry with cream cheese, skewers of roasted vegetables, little tartlets topped with glossy berries. Guests smiled politely, took what they wanted, and turned back to their conversations. All the while, Hannah kept glancing toward the girl's table. The girl's father, or at least Hannah assumed he was her father, was busy moving through. The crowd, shaking hands and laughing in that effortless way people in expensive suits seemed to do. He was clearly an important figure here. Every time he stopped to speak with someone, people leaned in attentively, their expressions shifting between admiration and respect. The girl, however, didn't seem part of that world at all. She looked like a small island in the middle of a busy ocean. When Hannah finally had a few minutes to breathe, she carried an empty tray back toward the kitchen. She passed close to the girl's table and slowed her steps just enough to catch a better look. The girl was twisting a silver bracelet around her wrist, her gaze drifting toward the dance floor where the music had just shifted into a slower, sweeter tune. Two little girls in colorful dresses were holding hands, spinning each other in a clumsy but joyful circle. The girl in blue watched them, her expression softening for a moment before the faintest shadow returned to her eyes. Something about that look tugged at Hannah's heart. She remembered being a child at weddings and parties where she didn't know anyone, sitting at a table while the other kids seemed to have their own little universe that she couldn't step into. She remembered the heavy feeling in her stomach, the way the minutes seemed to stretch endlessly. It wasn't a feeling she would wish on anyone, especially not a child who looked as sweet and fragile as this one. Without thinking too much about it, Hannah decided she couldn't just walk past again. She returned to the kitchen, set down her tray, and grabbed a small glass of water. It wasn't part of her job to personally check on guests unless they called for her. Done, but she figured a quiet act of kindness never hurt. She took the glass, walked back into the ballroom, and approached the table where the girl sat. The girl looked up as Hannah stopped beside her. Her eyes were a warm hazel, though they seemed shy, as if they weren't used to meeting as strangers. Gaze. Hannah crouched slightly so she wasn't towering over her. "Hi there," she said gently, offering a smile. "I thought you might like some water." The girl nodded politely and took the glass with both hands. "Thank you," she said in a small voice. "You're welcome," Hannah replied. She could have stood and walked away right then, but something made her stay a moment longer. "A beautiful party, isn't it?" she added softly. The girl hesitated, then glanced toward the dance floor before answering. "Yes, it's nice." Hannah noticed the pause and the slight drop in her tone. She tilted her head. "Do you like to dance?" she asked, keeping her voice light and friendly. The girl's fingers tightened slightly on the glass. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But not tonight," Hannah asked, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The girl gave a small shake of her head. I don't know anyone," she murmured. "And it's a lot of people." Hannah's heart softened. She understood exactly what the girl meant. "I used to feel that way too," she said with a reassuring smile. "When I was your age, I was so scared of dancing in front of people that I'd hide in the bathroom until the music stopped." That made the girl's eyes widen slightly, as if surprised that an adult could have felt the same way. "Really?" she asked. "Really?" Hannah said with a little laugh. But you know what? One day someone took my hand and said, "Come on, it's just for fun," and we danced. Just the two of us. No one else mattered in that moment. It wasn't scary anymore. The girl looked down at her glass, then back up at the dance floor. Hannah could see the faintest flicker of longing in her eyes. On impulse, Hannah extended her hand. Would you like to try? Us? We don't have to go in the middle. We can stay over in the corner, where it's quieter. The girl blinked, clearly torn between shyness and curiosity. She glanced toward the spot where her father had been a moment ago, but he was across the room speaking with a group of guests. It's okay, Hannah said softly. We'll just go for one song. If you don't like it, we can stop. For a moment, the girl didn't move. Then slowly, she set down her glass and reached out her small hand. Hannah's smile widened, though she kept her movements calm, so as not to startle her. She gently closed her fingers around the girl's and gave a little squeeze. They walked toward the dance floor. It's not straight into the middle, but toward a quieter edge where the light was softer and fewer people were moving. Hannah moved slowly, letting the girl set the pace. She could feel the slight tremor in the small hand she held, but she also felt the trust beginning to grow. When they reached the edge of the floor, Hannah turned to face her. Okay, she said with a grin. We're just going to sway. Nothing fancy. The girl nodded, still a little stiff, her eyes darting around as if expecting everyone to be watching. But no one seemed to notice. The other dancers were caught up in their own laughter and music. Hannah began to move gently to the rhythm, just shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Like this, she said softly. The girl hesitated, then copied the movement, her steps small and uncertain. Hannah smiled encouragingly. Perfect, she whispered. A moment later, the girl let out the tiniest laugh, a sound so quiet that Hannah might have missed it if she weren't paying such close attention. It was the kind of laugh that came when something inside started to loosen, when the nervousness began to melt away. The song played on, the notes floating like a warm breeze through the ballroom. Hannah kept her eyes on the girl, offering small nods and gentle encouragement. With each passing second, the stiffness in the girl's shoulders eased, and her steps became a little surer. Hannah didn't know this child's story, didn't know why she was here or how she fit into this glittering world of wealth and formality, but she didn't need to know. All she knew was that in this moment, the girl was smiling, and that was enough. The music in the ballroom softened into a warm, flowing melody, the kind that seemed to wrap around the dancers like a gentle hug. Hannah kept her movements slow and easy, swaying side to side so the little girl in the pale blue dress wouldn't feel rushed. The girl's name she had learned in their short walk was Emily. She had said it quietly, almost as though she wasn't used to introducing herself to strangers. Hannah had repeated it back to her with a smile, making it sound like a name she had known for years. Emily's first steps were small, almost hesitant, like she was testing the water with the tips of her toes. She looked down at her shoes, as if the polished black leather might somehow tell her how to move. Hannah didn't push her. Instead, she began humming softly along with the tune, letting the music fill the space between them. You're doing great, she whispered. Not because Emily's steps were perfect, but because she was moving at all. For a while, Emily kept her gaze low, her eyes fixed on the smooth floor beneath them. But Hannah knew the trick to helping a shy dancer. You had to make the space feel small, even if it was surrounded by hundreds of people. So she leaned in just a little, as though sharing a secret, and said, Do you see the lights from the chandeliers? Pretend they're stars, and we're just dancing under the night sky. No one else is here. That made Emily glance up for the briefest second. Her eyes flicked toward the glittering crystals overhead, then back down again, but there was the faintest shift in her shoulders. The tension was beginning to melt. The music flowed around them, and the rest of the ballroom carried on. Guests laughing, clinking glasses, the band smiling at one another as they played. But for Hannah and Emily, the world seemed to shrink into a small, safe circle at the edge of the dance floor. Emily's lips twitched, almost forming a smile when Hannah added a silly little spin to her own movement. It wasn't graceful. She exaggerated the turn just enough to look playful, almost tripping over her own feet in a way that made it clear she was joking. Emily let out a small giggle, and the sound was like a spark in the quiet corners of her personality. You're a natural, Hannah said, though Emily immediately shook her head as if to disagree. You are, Hannah insisted gently. Dancing isn't about steps or looking perfect. It's about feeling happy while you move. And I can see you're starting to feel that. They continued swaying, Hannah keeping her own step slightly larger so Emily could match her without worrying about doing it wrong. Slowly, Emily began lifting her gaze more often. She noticed a couple nearby giving them space, smiling in quiet encouragement. She saw the edge of the stage where the band played, the upright bass standing tall, the drummer tapping gently, the pianist's hands moving like water over the keys. And then, far across the room, she caught sight of her father. Richard Dawson had just finished speaking with a well-dressed man in a gray suit when his attention drifted toward the dance floor. His eyes scanned over the crowd, almost unconsciously, until they landed on a small, familiar figure in blue. He paused. For a moment, he thought he must be mistaken. Emily never danced at events like this. But there she was, moving carefully, in time with the music, and she wasn't alone. The person dancing with her wasn't one of the other children, nor a family friend, nor someone in a gown or tuxedo. It was a waitress in a simple black uniform, her hair pulled back neatly, her posture relaxed and unself-conscious. She held Emily's small hand with care, guiding her steps, her eyes warm with encouragement. Richard's conversation faded from his mind, the noise of the room dulling to a distant hum. He found himself watching the way Emily's mouth curved. Just slightly, a shy smile that he hadn't seen in a while, the kind that wasn't forced for a photograph or polite greeting, but real, growing naturally out of the moment. For a man accustomed to grand displays of generosity and carefully orchestrated events, this was something entirely different. It wasn't about speeches or public acts of kindness. It was about a quiet, noticed gesture that had somehow reached his daughter in a way he could in single quotes. Hannah, unaware that Richard's gaze was on them, kept guiding Emily gently through the music. At one point, she let go of Emily's hand just long enough to clap softly to the beat, encouraging her to move her feet a little more freely. Emily hesitated, then tried a small sidestep, her dress swaying with the movement. When she looked up, Hannah grinned at her as if she'd just done something spectacular. Richard's chest tightened as he watched. Emily's world was often small, carefully protected. She wasn't the child to run into a crowd or grab the spotlight. Seeing her open up, even just a little, felt like watching a flower turn toward the sun. And the fact that it was happening because of a stranger, a young woman who had no reason to give his daughter, this kind of attention made it even more powerful. The song began to build toward its gentle ending, the notes of the piano lingering like the last rays of light before dusk. Hannah gave Emily a small nod, and together they turned slowly, letting the final chords carry them. When the music faded, there was a soft ripple of applause from the crowd for the band. Hannah crouched slightly so she was closer to Emily's. "Height, you did it," she said quietly. "You danced. You did amazing." Emily's cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but with a shy pride. "Thank you," she whispered, and then without thinking too much about it, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Hannah in a quick, tight hug. Hannah was a little surprised, but she returned the hug without hesitation, holding her just long enough to let her know it was welcome. Richard, still watching, felt a rush of emotion he hadn't expected. It wasn't often that something caught him off guard like this, but in that moment, he wasn't Richard Dawson, billionaire and philanthropist. He was simply a father, watching someone show his daughter a kindness that money couldn't buy. When Emily and Hannah stepped away from the dance floor, Hannah kept her hand lightly on Emily's back, guiding her toward her table. She didn't notice that Richard was already making his way across the room toward them, a quiet determination in his stride. He didn't yet know what he would say, but he knew he wanted to meet the person who had just given his daughter a gift far greater than anything wrapped in ribbon. Richard Dawson's steps were quiet but deliberate as he approached the edge of the dance floor. He could feel the energy of the room around him, the soft chatter of guests, the clinking of glasses, the occasional burst of laughter from a nearby table, yet all of it seemed to blur into the background. In his mind, there was only one thing: the young woman who had just danced with his daughter, had seen the way she had held Emily's hand, how gently she had guided her, how effortlessly she had drawn a shy, cautious child out of her shell. That simple, quiet act carried a kind of power that words could not describe. Emily had returned to her seat at the edge of the room, cheeks still flushed, eyes shining with the afterglow of the dance. She kept glancing toward the floor as though trying to hold on to the feeling of moving freely, of doing something brave without fear of judgment. Her small hands fidgeted in her lap, twisting a napkin in tiny, careful movements. She was trying not to look embarrassed, but there was a glow of pride beneath her shyness that made it clear she had done something she never thought she could do. Hannah remained at her side, crouched slightly to meet her at eye level. She offered a soft smile, the kind that felt genuine and warm. "You were amazing," she said. "Do you know how brave you were out there?" Emily shook her head, a faint, shy smile touching her lips. "I was scared," she admitted quietly. "But it was fun, too." Her words were halting, like each one had to be carefully chosen and measured. Hannah nodded, understanding exactly what that meant. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. Before Hannah could respond, Richard's voice broke through the soft murmur of the room. "Excuse me," he said, calm yet carrying a weight of authority and warmth that immediately drew their attention. Emily looked up, startled, and then froze when she realized who was speaking. Richard Dawson, her father, was standing there, watching them intently. Hannah straightened slightly, her expression a mix of respect and quiet surprise. She had noticed him earlier. Of course, she had seen the way he scanned the dance floor, had seen the way his eyes lingered on Emily with a mixture of protectiveness and curiosity. But now, standing right in front of her, he was larger than life. Not because of wealth or presence, but because of the quiet intensity of a father who truly cared. Richard's eyes softened as he looked at Hannah. Then he glanced at Emily. "I saw what you did out there," he said. His voice was steady, but carried a weight of emotion that made Hannah feel the depth of his gratitude without needing to hear the words spelled out. "You helped my daughter do something she's never done before. You guided her. You made her feel safe enough to move when she didn't think she could." Hannah's lips parted slightly, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. She had helped children before, guided, encouraged, smiled at them, taught them small steps in dance or in confidence, but she had never been thanked in a way that felt so profound, so deeply personal. It was nothing, really," she said softly, her humility genuine. Emily just needed someone to be there with her, to let her know it was okay to try. Richard shook his head slowly, stepping closer. "It's everything," he insisted, "everything. You don't understand how much this means. She's usually so reserved, so careful, so unsure of herself in moments like this. And yet you managed to reach her in a way I couldn't. I want to know you. I want to thank you properly." Emily, watching the exchange, felt a flutter of excitement and a little nervousness. She had seen her father protect her, guide her, sometimes gently scold her, always care for her. But she had never seen him look at someone else with this kind of awe or gratitude. There was respect in his gaze, yes, but there was also a raw human recognition of the goodness he had just witnessed. Emily felt proud of Hannah, proud that this stranger had taken the time to understand her. To make her feel safe, Hannah took a small step forward, meeting Richard's gaze fully. I love helping children feel comfortable. Dance, music, small moments like this, they can mean so much more than people realize. And Emily, she's an extraordinary child. Brave, thoughtful, kind. She just needed a little encouragement." Richard's expression softened further, and for the first time, he allowed a small, genuine smile to break across his face. "Extraordinary," he repeated. "Yes, she is, and you've helped her see that in herself. I don't know how to thank you enough." He paused, as if weighing whether words could truly capture his feelings. Would you join us for a moment? I'd like to talk to you, get to know you properly." Hannah hesitated for just a heartbeat and then nodded. "Of course," she said. She turned back to Emily and smiled. "You did wonderfully, Emily. I'm proud of you." Emily beamed, her cheeks glowing even more. She felt a warmth spreading. In her chest, a mixture of pride and happiness, and the simple joy of being seen and understood. Hannah gave her one last gentle pat on the shoulder before turning to face Richard. They moved toward a quieter corner of the room, away from the laughter and music, but still within the soft glow of chandeliers and candlelight. "What?" Richard motioned for Hannah to take a seat, and she obliged, keeping her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I need to know your story," Richard said, settling into a chair across from her. His tone was curious but not intrusive, respectful but deeply interested. "Who are you? How did you end up here, in a place where you could touch my daughter's life in such a simple but powerful way?" Hannah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. She could tell he wasn't asking because he wanted to impress anyone or because of social expectation. He genuinely wanted to understand her, to see the path that had led her to this point. And for the first time in a long while, Hannah felt comfortable sharing her story. "I've always loved helping children," she began, "even as a child. Myself, I found that I was happiest when I could encourage others, help them feel confident, even in the smallest ways. Dance, music, games, it doesn't matter. If a child can feel safe enough to try something new, that's where I feel like I belong." Richard listened, his eyes never leaving hers, absorbing every word. "That's admirable," he said, "and rare. Most people, they see children, but they don't truly reach them. You did. And I can see it." Emily felt it immediately. Hannah smiled faintly, a little self-conscious but proud at the same time. "It's not about me," she said. "It's about them, their courage, their willingness to step out of their comfort zone. Emily's brave. I just helped her notice it." Richard leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I wish I could always be that person for her," he admitted. "But life, sometimes it makes you watch from the sidelines. And yet here you were, and you gave her something I couldn't." There was a pause, a quiet moment where the music and chatter of the ballroom faded into the background. Hannah realized the depth of the impact she had just made. It wasn't just about a dance or a hug. It was about trust, connection, and opening a child's heart in a way that would stay with her forever. Finally, Richard smiled again, warmer. "This time, I want to make sure you know how grateful I am," he said. "Not just as a parent, but as someone who recognizes true kindness when it happens. Emily will remember this moment forever. And I want to make sure you're recognized for it as well." Hannah's eyes softened, a little overwhelmed by his words. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a lot." Richard glanced back toward Emily, who was quietly watching them from her seat, still glowing from the dance. "She's lucky," he said softly. "Not everyone gets someone like you in their life, even for a short time. You've given her a memory that will carry her forward, and, honestly, I can't thank you enough for that." Hannah's smile widened slightly. "It was my honor," she said. "Truly." And in that quiet, golden-lit corner of the room, two worlds had briefly intersected. The world of a billionaire father, protective and loving, and the world of a kind-hearted young woman who had seen the courage in a small child and nurtured it. For Richard, it was a moment of gratitude and awe. For Hannah, it was a confirmation that even small acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways that touched lives deeply. And for Emily, it was a turning point, a moment she would carry with her, forever remembering that she could be brave, and that someone believed in her enough to guide her into that bravery. The connection was quiet but profound, and in that shared understanding, something more than gratitude was born, a bond of respect, care, and human kindness that transcended wealth, status, or circumstance. It was simply the recognition that a heart willing to help could change a life, even. In one short, magical evening, the night had settled into a calm, gentle rhythm. The music in the ballroom had slowed to a soft hum, and the guests had begun to drift away, some lingering to exchange quiet words, others moving toward the exits, their laughter fading into the warm evening air. Yet in the midst of it all, a small, quiet energy lingered around Emily. Hannah and Richard, a kind of unspoken understanding. that this night had become something far more significant than anyone could have anticipated. Emily was still seated at her small table near the edge of the dance floor, her cheeks glowing with the lingering warmth of courage and joy. She kept glancing at Hannah, who had remained nearby, their hands occasionally brushing in a comforting, reassuring way. There was a sense of calm triumph in Emily's demeanor, a realization that she had faced a fear and found joy in the process. The fear that had weighed on her for so long, the hesitation that had kept her from joining in simple moments of fun, seemed to have lifted, even if only a little. It was a feeling that she knew she would carry with her like a secret treasure. Tucked safely in her heart, Richard watched the two of them, a mixture of pride and admiration filling his chest. He had seen many accomplishments in his life, many achievements that carried recognition and applause, but none of them had felt like this. Watching Emily, his daughter, step forward into courage, supported by a kind and selfless stranger, had created a ripple of emotion that he could not put into words. There was gratitude, yes, but there was also awe. A sense of something beautiful unfolding in real time, something far more valuable than wealth or status, human connection, trust, and the quiet power of encouragement. Hannah, meanwhile, stood near the table. Her posture calm and open, yet her mind raced quietly. She had spent years teaching and helping children, but tonight had been different. Tonight had been intimate, deeply personal. She had witnessed a transformation, small yet profound, in a child's life. She had felt the weight of gratitude, an admiration from someone who had the power to change the world, yet recognized the small human acts that truly mattered. It was humbling, and it made her heart swell in a way she could barely describe. Richard finally spoke, his voice low, but carrying the warmth of sincerity. "Emily, I want you to know something," he said, leaning slightly toward his daughter. His eyes held the kind of steady focus that made her feel both safe and important. Courage isn't about never being scared. Courage is about moving forward even when you are scared. Tonight you were courageous, and that is something no one can ever take from you. Emily's eyes widened, a soft glow of pride and happiness spreading across her face. She had heard her father's words before, of course, in smaller ways, in moments of reassurance or gentle encouragement. But this was different. This was a declaration of recognition, of understanding. She felt seen in a way she hadn't before, and for the first time, she felt that her small steps, her willingness to try, to trust, to dance were truly meaningful. Hannah smiled at Emily, her eyes reflecting pride and joy. "You did it." "Emily," she said softly, "you stepped out, and you found the courage inside yourself. And that's the most beautiful thing anyone can ever do." Emily reached out and held Hannah's hand for a brief moment, a small gesture of connection that carried more meaning than words could express. In that simple touch, Emily felt the warmth of guidance, the strength of support, and the quiet affirmation that she had taken a step toward being herself. Fully an unapologetic ally. Richard, observing the exchange, felt a surge of emotion that he had not anticipated. He had thought of tonight as a formal event, a gathering of people for celebration and social enjoyment. But it had become something entirely different, a life lesson, a moment of growth, a memory that would linger long after the chandeliers were dimmed and the music faded. He realized that moments like these, fragile and fleeting, were the ones that truly shaped lives. And he wanted to make sure that both Emily and Hannah knew how profoundly they had affected each other. And him. Turning to Hannah, Richard's expression softened. "I know we haven't known each other long," he said carefully, "but I feel like tonight has created a connection that matters. You have given my daughter something invaluable, a sense of confidence, a spark of joy. I want to make sure you know how much this means." Hannah shook her head, a small, self-conscious smile touching her lips. "I don't need anything in return," she said. The joy of seeing Emily smile, of seeing her take a step she never thought she could, that's enough for me. That's the reward. Richard's eyes softened and he nodded, understanding fully the depth of her words. Still he said, "I want you to know that your kindness doesn't go unnoticed. You've made a difference tonight, a real difference. And I hope you'll allow me to find a way to show my gratitude, not as a wealthy man, not as a father, but simply as someone who recognizes goodness when he sees it." Before Hannah could respond, Emily spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. "Daddy, can we keep dancing sometimes?" she asked, looking at both of them. "Even if it's just a little. Even if I'm scared." Richard smiled, his heart swelling at the bravery in her small voice. "Of course, Emily," he said warmly. "We can dance any time you want. Can dance for courage, for joy, for fun, whatever you need. And we'll always have someone to guide us if we're afraid." He glanced at Hannah, his eyes reflecting gratitude and respect. "And maybe we can all dance together sometimes. It would be an honor to have you there." Hannah's heart warmed at the invitation. "I'd love that," she said softly, feeling a mixture of happiness and humility. "It would be my pleasure to share these moments with both of you." For the next hour, the three of them remained near the edge of the dance floor, occasionally moving in small, hesitant steps as Emily regained her confidence. Each movement, each sway, each turn was a testament to courage and trust, a silent celebration of connection. Emily laughed softly when she stumbled, and Richard chuckled alongside her, encouraging her gently. Hannah offered guidance and reassurance, never pushing, never taking control, just allowing Emily to find her own rhythm. As the night grew late, the ballroom began to empty, the guests drifting away into the cool night air. But Emily, Richard, and Hannah remained, wrapped in their own quiet world, the music fading but the joy lingering. Emily had found something precious, the realization that courage was within her, waiting to be discovered, and that support and kindness could come from unexpected places. Richard had witnessed a moment of transformation in his daughter, something no wealth or privilege could buy. And Hannah had experienced the profound impact of her own kindness, the proof that one small act could ripple outward in ways she had never imagined. When it was finally time to leave, Richard extended his hand to Hannah. "I want you to know," he said sincerely, "that you've earned a place in our lives if you'll allow it, not just tonight, but for the future. Emily needs people like you, people who see her, who guide her, who help her believe in herself and I would be grateful if you accepted our friendship." Hannah's eyes glistened with emotion. She had never expected to be offered a place in a wealthy family's inner circle, nor had she sought it. But she understood the meaning behind his words, the acknowledgement of trust, respect, and genuine human connection. She nodded, her voice steady, but full of feeling. "I would be honored," she said. Emily clapped her small hands together. Softly, her laughter bubbling up. "Can we dance tomorrow too?" she asked, her eyes shining with excitement and anticipation. Richard chuckled and scooped her into his arms, holding her close. "Yes, sweetheart," he said. "We can dance tomorrow. It's every day after that, if you'd like." Hannah watched them, a sense of fulfillment and joy filling her chest. She realized that tonight had been about more than a dance or a hug. It had been about courage, trust, and the profound ways in which kindness could change lives. She felt honored to have been part of this moment, to have played a role in helping a young girl discover her own strength as they stepped out into the night. The cool air brushing against their faces, there was a sense of renewal, of hope, of possibility. Emily held Hannah's hand tightly, her small fingers entwined with hers. And Richard walked beside them, his presence steady and protective. Together, they moved forward, not just from the ballroom, but toward a future filled with trust, courage, and the quiet power of human connection. In the days and weeks that followed, the memory of that night remained vivid. Emily found herself dancing more often, both literally and figuratively, stepping into challenges with newfound bravery. Richard watched with quiet pride as his daughter grew more confident, more joyful, more willing to embrace the unknown. And Hannah continued to guide and support her, always patient, always kind, always recognizing the spark of courage within Emily's heart. The night had been a turning point, a moment that would ripple through their lives in ways they could never have predicted. It had begun with a simple hug, a gentle act of guidance, a small step of bravery. And it had ended with something far greater, a bond of trust, love, and human connection that would last a lifetime.